Conan Doyle was born in 1858 in Edinburgh, Scotland. Arthur was intelligent and he had a great sense of humor. His mother gave him the love to storytelling. He spent 7 years in Jesuit boarding schools, which is located in England. He was graduated after age of 17 and he chose to study medicine. In 1885, he was married on Patient's sister, Louisa Hawkins, and they had one daughter, Mary, and one son, Kingsley. Arthur Conan Doyle was a successful writer and doctor. Moreover, he wanted to be a soldier twice, but he was declined because of overweight. He died in 1930 because of angina pectoris, and he was surrounded by his family.
Sherlock Holmes is probably the most well-known and loved fictional detective in literature. It's interesting to know that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually modeled his famous detective after an associate, Dr. Joseph Bell. Dr. Bell had a long, thin nose, much as we picture Sherlock Holmes, and was very observant. He also used strong deductive skills.
So the first appearing of Sherlock Holmes was in 1887, The Study in Scarlet. The character's popularity became widespread with the first series of the short stories in the Strand magazine, beginning with the Scandal in Bohemia in 1891. Additional tales appeared from then until 1927, eventually totaling 4 novels and 56 short stories written by Arthur Conan Doyle.
The adventures of Sherlock Holmes were well received upon their serialization in the Strand magazine. Following the publication of A Scandal in Bohemia in July 1891, the whole Daily Mail, the newspaper which is popular among England residents, described the stories about brilliant detective as worthy of the inventive genius. By the way, another author of the Strand magazine described the stories about Sherlock Holmes that they have the unique power of Doyle's writing in the gulf in the quality between the stories.
Stories of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle were very popular as adaptations for the stage, in later films, and still later on television. It has been estimated that Sherlock Holmes is the most prolific screen character in the history of the cinema. The actor most associated with this character of Sherlock Holmes was William Gillette. His version of Holmes, dressed in a deerstalker hat, an Inverness cape, and smoking a large curved calabash pipe, contributed much to the popular image of the character.
So, the Sherlock Holmes Museum is at the fictional detective's former home, located at 221B Baker Street. According to the stories written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes and his loyal friend Dr. Watson lived at this exact address from 1881 to 1904. It's a 1-minute walk from Baker Street Tube Station and 5 minutes from Marylebone Railway Station. With many fascinating things to see at Sherlock Holmes Museum, you can easily spend there 1 to 2 hours. Tickets to Sherlock Holmes Museum cost £15 for adults and £10 for children under 16 years of age.
In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine of the University of London and proceeded to Netley to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the army. Having completed my studies there, I was duly attached as assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. So memorable and evocative is the opening sentence of this collection of Sherlock Holmes stories that many people believe them to be the first words of the whole series to Sherlock Holmes. She is always the woman in fact the public first met the great detective and his faithful chronicler in 2 novels, The Study in Scarlet and The Sign of Fall. But it was this collection of short stories, with its stunning variety of high and low locals, its depth and startling touches of the macabre, passionate and humorous, its unique originality and brilliance in plotting character, in suspense that really cemented the characters into the public imagination and set the seal on the author Arthur Conan Doyle's reputation.
The cozy certainties of the snug bachelor rooms in Baker Street contrast perfectly with the opium dens, grand saloons, country houses, and suburban villas, where terrible vengeances Daring robberies, bloody murders, cruel swindles, violent amputations, and inexplicable disappearances take place. And above all, where the fog of mystery is dispelled and cleared by the mind of the world's first and greatest master detective. This collection contains some of the most cherished and memorable of all the Sherlock Holmes exploits. The Blue Carbuncle remains a classic Victorian Christmas tale rich with an almost Dickensian Yuletide spirit and comic brio. Holmes' examination of Mr. Henry Baker's pathetic head and the inferences he draws from it are a priceless example of the detective's signature ability to read so much from apparently so little. But the terror, cruelty, and fright of the story called The Speckled Band belongs in any anthology not just to great detective stories, but of great tales of horror.
Time and time again, generations have shown us a neat Holmes, something in his assured blend of omniscience and infinite tenacity, humanized with intriguing character flaws, speaks deeply to our need for solutions to the problems of our own very different world today. Watch him, the faithful Watson, our reliable narrator, descend the 17 steps from their upper story rooms and out into Baker Street, and we feel reassured. Holmes' famous magnifying glass, and accompanying habit of crawling round on all floors at the scenes of a crime like a fox hound, was perhaps the first suggestion in literature at least that the tiniest of chases can tell a story, can play out the narrative of a crime scene, and lead back inevitably to its perpetrators and victims, its cigar ash, footprints, and almost invisible telltale particles as the forerunners of the crime lab's mitochondrial DNA, epithelial particles, and microfibers. His magnifying glass gives way to today's electron scanning microscope, but the principles are quite unchanged, which is why his presiding spirit behind every CSI operative.
But the principles are quite unchanged, which is why he is the presiding spirit behind every CSI operative, and why the modern Scotland Yard criminal database, the Home Office large major inquiry system, has initials that spell out the name Holmes. It's no accident that Conan Doyle was, like Watson, a fully qualified doctor. He knew that throughout the 19th century, medical science had advanced anatomy, the microscope, and the systematic empirical observation of all kinds of phenomena. London had moved from an unhealthy, floral-ridden metropolis of death to the template of a modern city. If germs and bacilli could be isolated and pathologists identified through patient study, close attention, and rigorous thinking, couldn't social diseases too? Might and that be a great crime doctor who could put a metaphorical stethoscope to the heart of the nation, take the pulse of society, place a thermometer under the tongue of a whole people, cleanse the morally foul with the fresh running water.
But the idea of crime as a disease and detective as doctor has persisted right up to American TV's enormously successful drama House, which was consciously modeled on Conan Doyle's prototype. There's not much distance between House and Holmes after all. As was all characters, House takes the cases that no one else can solve. He has a drug problem and a cold, logical manner that puts some people off. His partner and faithful that sometimes nagging friend is called not Watson, but Wilson. I recall to a Sylvester Stallone movie called Cobra, whose publicity posters shouted, "Crime is a disease, meet the cure." Needless to say, Sly's modus operandi was not quite the same as House's, but the idea persists. We need someone like Holmes, as Watson tells him in the pitch-perfect story. The red-headed leak, second in the collection you're about to hear. You reasoned it so beautifully. It is so long a chain, and yet every link rings true. You were a benefactor to the race. Amen to that. Popular fiction offers different kinds of superhero to save the world by restoring order to the chaos, confusion, and criminality of our times. Pierre with remarkable gifts are as in vogue now as they have been since they first appeared, perhaps even more in vogue.
But although the very first one was launched in serial published form just like his masked and bodysuit successors, it was not in DC or Marvel comic books that he made his appearance. Rather, it was in the sedate and respectable pages of Mrs. Beeton's Christmas Annual in the mid-Victorian year 1887. This caped crusader's cape was made of finest British tweed. His magical gifts were not the ability to fly or X-ray vision. His superpower was that he had trained his mind into a uniquely powerful weapon, which could solve mysteries, unmask the guilty, and right wrongs. You'll believe a mind can fly as you watch him so way above the cozy fog of the metropolis. This Superman can see through solid barriers impenetrable to others. None of the supervillains or henchmen ranged against him can withstand the laser blast of his logical analysis or the vice-like grip of his deductive reasoning. He stands for truth, justice, and the British way, and his name is Sherlock Holmes.